Okay, is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. So before I start today's session, uh, I'll quickly summarize what we discussed yesterday in 1 minute, 1 or 2 minutes, and we'll discuss if there are any pending doubts, and then we can get started with today's session. So yesterday we discussed about the exposure triangle. So there are three parameters which are present in the exposure triangle. One is the aperture, second one is shutter speed, and the third one is ISO. Now each of them affect the exposure in one or the other way. At the same time, they also have few side effects. So now first we'll talk about aperture. If the aperture is more, that is, if the f-stop number is less, it means that you are going to get brighter images. But if your aperture is less, that is your f number is more, then you will get darker images. Now the side effect of aperture is the bokeh effect. That is, it blurs the background, which is also called as depth of field. Depth of field is the distance between your very first object and the very last object in the frame. So the camera will focus only on the first object and it blurs out everything else. So that's all about the aperture. And coming to shutter speed. So shutter is nothing but the curtain that is present in the camera. So shutter speed is how fast this curtain closes. So if this curtain is if the shutter speed is high, that is the shutter closes very fastly. It means that very little amount of light enters into the camera. So since little amount of light enters, the images are going to be darker. So for the higher shutter speeds, the images are going to be darker. But if the shutter speed is slow, in that case, the shutter would be open for a long time, so that more amount of light will enter into the lens, hence you'll get brighter images. And the so this is the impact of shutter speed on exposure. Now, what is the side effect of shutter speed? The side effect is the motion blur. So what is a motion blur? I'll show it to you so that we can recollect what motion blur is. So this is the depth of field. So it blurs out your background. That's regarding the aperture. So this is the shutter. The shutter is open here. The shutter is closed here. So the side effect of shutter speed is motion blur. So if your shutter is open for a long time, so some motion would have been captured by the camera during that duration when the shutter was open. So your camera is supposed to capture the entire motion that happened during the time when the shutter is open. For that reason, when it combines the entire motion, but it is supposed to give you a still frame, it's going to get blurred in this way. Now, what happens when you have a fast shutter speed is that the shutter closes very fast. So there won't be any motion when your shutter closes so fast. It's almost instantaneous and you'll get a proper picture. So when you have a faster shutter speed, there won't be such motion blur. It will be very clear and smooth. It'll be very stable. So that's the impact of shutter. The third parameter in the exposure triangle is ISO. ISO is quite simple. ISO is also called as fake light. So when you do not have, so ISO simply adds electronic light or brightness to your frame. So if your ISO is low, the images will be darker. If your ISO is high, your images will be bright. Now that's the impact of ISO on exposure. But the side effect of ISO is grain. So if your ISO is high, it also introduces grain into your frame. So what is a grain again? So grain is nothing but dots. It introduces this noise into the pictures. I'll show you that as well. This one. So you see all these dots. Your frame brightness will increase, but it will add all these dots, which will create a lot of noise in the picture. And we also discussed about the 180-degree shutter rule. Whatever your FPS is, your shutter speed is supposed to be 1/2 times the frame rate. Usually we always use 24 frames per second so that it looks very natural, and our mind can perceive it as a proper motion and natural. So FPS should always be kept at 24. All the movie recordings, right? Every single movie is also shot in 24 FPS in general, except for few fighting scenes or any few special scenes. Except for that, the general shooting is always done in 24 FPS. So the FPS is fixed, and the shutter speed, it has to be 1 by 2 times frame rate. So the shutter speed will always be 1 by 48 or 1 by 50. Now, that's all about the three parameters. Now we'll just quickly see what should be the values that we should set. So our lens that we are using has the aperture of f4, which means that you can increase your aperture, sorry, you can decrease your aperture from f4 to f16. So this is the lens stat, right? So our f4 is here. So you can go from f4 to f5.6, f8, f11, f16. So if you consider each of them is called an f stop. From one stop to other stop, the lighting is reduced to half. So from f4 to f5.8, so f5.6, f5.6 has half the light that would enter the light if it was for f4. So f2.8, f2, and f1.4, they give brighter lightings. But then if you want to buy a zoom lens along with higher aperture, you need to spend a lot of money. So what we should do is that we should always put the aperture at 4 so that it gives us a decent depth of field, and we should always put the FPS as 24. Should always shoot with shutter of 1 by 48, and we should choose native ISO. So what is native ISO? You have two native ISOs. One is 125, the other is 800. So okay, which one should we choose? That depends on the mode that we are shooting. If we are shooting in aperture priority or shutter priority, etc., at that time we should use 125 native ISO. If you're doing movie recording in 4K, then it's okay to shoot it up till 800. But if still your lighting is not enough, you can shoot it even more, and it's easy to get rid of the noise. There won't be much noise actually for lower values, but if it comes to it, the only parameter which you can tweak is the ISO. So this is a very quick summary of what we discussed yesterday. So are there any doubts regarding this?
We are good, Ramakant.
One small question from my side, Ramakant.
Anna.
Actually, I'm little bit, need some clarity with regards to ISO. From my understanding, it is like, what I understood is like, then it should be, we need to keep the low ISO. And if it is, less light, we need to keep high ISO. That is what I understood.
What,
But
Anna,
you said
can you once repeat, Anna? I couldn't hear your voice.
Yeah, actually, I'm a little bit confused. A little bit need more clarity on the ISO. ISO, from what I understand, maybe I misunderstand. I might be misunderstood, but from my understanding is that if there is low light, then we need to keep high ISO. If there is high light, then we need to keep low ISO. This is what I understand. Even though there is more sunlight also, ISO should be low only. So I need a little bit more clarity on this thing.
Okay. Yeah, understood, Anna. So actually, there's no rule that if it is dark, you should increase the ISO. If it is light, you should decrease the ISO. The usual understanding is that no matter if your scene is dark or bright, you should always keep your ISO at low, because if you increase the ISO, grain would be added. Now, coming to the main part of your question, uh, let's say that the scene that we are shooting in is dark. What do? We should use, we should increase the studio lights that we have. So I'm sure that, especially in our scenario, we have in our studio setup, we have these lighting setup, right? So you should always keep your ISO at the minimum so that you will not get any noise. But since we want brighter scenes, you should increase, the lighting, both the temperature, at the same time the percentage of light, so that the lighting that's there in the scene will be high, but your ISO will be at minimum, so that enough light would enter into the scene without us having to increase the ISO. Now, let's say that we are shooting outdoors. So, if you are shooting outdoors, there is only one way, one choice. You definitely have to bring down the ISO for two reasons. The first reason is, of course, if the ISO is low, there will not be any disturbance. The second reason is that in a bright scene, there is no way we'll shoot up the ISO because it will make the scene even more brighter. So there is no confusion in brighter scenes. In bright scenes, there is only one choice, which is we put the ISO at minimum. Now, coming to our studio setup, right? So in our studio setup, even though we have the lighting and everything set up, sometimes we may feel that it's better if we, increase the brightness somehow. So in that case scenario, from keeping the ISO to bare minimum, we can increase the ISO by a bit. You can tweak it a little so that your scene will become a bit more brighter. That's it. Because we should not touch the shutter speed. If you touch the shutter speed to control the exposure, yeah, the movement of the speaker, like our Swami's hands, when he move it, it will become unnatural. So we should not touch the shutter speed, and we should also not touch the aperture, because if you change the aperture, let's say our aperture is at f4, right? So if you make it next stop for aperture is at 5.6. If you do it as 5.6, half the light will be gone here itself. On top of that, the depth of field will be almost minimum, so it won't look good. So we cannot touch aperture, we cannot touch shutter speed, but still without, and of course you cannot touch ISO also. In general, you cannot touch ISO because if you increase ISO, grain will increase. But still, when you are trying to record, you are seeing that your scene is dark, it's not bright, but it is not good for you. You want to make it brighter. So in that case, your only choice is to touch the ISO. Yes, ISO should be kept at minimum, but it's okay to increase it a bit in order to make the scene bright. Is it clear enough?
Yes, yes. Now it is clear, Ramakant. Yeah.
Ramakant, can you show the video that you have shot the live video where Swati was sitting, right? So
Hmm.
that one, and also compared with the same video where Prasad sir was sitting, with a couple of photos or the videos that we have, right? So with when
Swatik.
Prasad sir was sitting in the same chair, the ISO was little bit more. But when the second time we did in the live video, you made it to minimum. So it is the
Hmm.
same lighting did not change in that room. It is the same lighting, but with
Hmm.
low ISO and high ISO, the output will be a darker shade on the person's face and fairer face on the person's face when the ISO is more with same
Yeah,
lighting.
same idea.
So I
And
think
that is those links. Swatika, do you have those links with you?
YouTube
I think
link.
you shared with me Ramakant in the satsang group, I guess.
Satsang group.
Type.
Right.
Ramakant, you want that YouTube link, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah,
live.
YouTube link.
Command F live will come.
And okay, you're telling to
Live
me.
YT live, I think. YT space live. I think in my private chat. I mean DM. Go to my chat.
Okay, going. Okay, Swatika, sharing.
Okay. Go to the end
Okay.
part, the last 5 minutes. Yeah. So this is zero ISO.
It's not zero ISO.
It is minimum.
I at, yeah, it's near to ISO, the minimum ISO, but there are few things which happened while I shot this. I chose a cinematic profile, which made this footage look like, look cinematic. But the actual way of using it is after we record the video, we are supposed to do few settings in post processing. Like when we do the video post processing, we are supposed to make few changes, and we are supposed to apply few things. Then the reality of the scene will come out, which I was not aware when I was shooting. Later, I came to know. But as Trilokya told, so let if you put your ISO at very low level, right? So I just play it in mute. So this is how it's going to look. So I mean, it may look okay. It may not be that bad.
Now in comparison, we can show the footage that we shot when Prasad sir sat on the chair and he was reading the verses, right? I think on the first day. Swati, to have that with you, you edited that, you removed the green screen also.
Yeah, let me check.
Yeah.
I think that you shared in Satsang group. Let me check.
Yeah. You can share that with me once.
Yeah, let her check and share. We can continue,
Hmm.
Raman.
You can continue.
Once.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. So no doubts regarding the exposure triangle, right? We are good with this. Now, so in today's session, we'll discuss. Okay, one more thing that I want to tell. So I made few changes to this document. So yesterday here the caption was day one. So I thought instead of keeping one document for one session, I'll just create these tabs for each session. I'll I'll put this intro also in session one. So let me click this. So if you click like this, right, you see all the topics that we discovered that we covered. So aperture, the different, subfields, shutter speed, ISO, summary, etc. And I created another tab, session two. I'll be creating similarly for all the other sessions as well. So that we'll have one single document. So what we'll discuss today are five topics: white balance, exposure compensation, exposure bar or multimeter, and ND filters. And then we'll also discuss about lens, the concept of lenses. So you can get started now. So first, before I discuss white balance, first I'll discuss the problem that we are encountering, and then I'll discuss the solution. So yesterday, Abhiram Anna actually asked this question. So Ramakant, if all the settings that you're telling are fixed, and if you want to, you know, if you're shooting in the studio, and if this in morning you'll see one kind of shade, in evening you'll see a different kind of shade. Sometimes it will be brighter, sometimes it will be a bit cool. It need not even vary from morning to evening. Even in span of 5 to 10 minutes, the shade of sun can change, right? And the light that's entering into a room, it also potentially could impact the frame, is what he asked. So which is completely true. And for that, the concept of white balance has been introduced. So now I'll tell you what white balance is. So white balance is a setting that's present in our cameras, which is used to tell our camera what is a white color. Okay. Now, what do I mean by that is, so if you look at this image, right? So it's a bit of blue color shade, in white. Now this looks like very clear shade of white, and sometimes you have very orangish, kind of shade in white. So all these are natural light, right? Now, when you go out in the sun, everything is white. So if it's very sunny also it's white. If it's cloudy also it is white, and if it's in the middle also it's white. If it's ideal lighting uh, of sun, then also it's white. So your camera should will consider all of them as white only, because it doesn't know what kind of white you want. So white balance is the option to tell the camera that this is the kind of white that I want to record. Okay. Now here is how it's going to work. The very first thing which I want to discuss in white balance is auto white balance. There is concept of auto white balance wherein your camera will decide what is the white light. Now there is a concept in photography which says that 18 percentage of gray shade is called as true white shade, because when you are shooting under lighting and when the light hits the 18% gray shade color, then uh, the way it looks in your camera, it's going to be very ideal white color light. So this is the principle of white balance. Now, what happens when you put it at auto white balance is that your camera will automatically adjust the lighting for you, the white light for us. Now, that's all good. So, what is the problem with that? The problem with that is, in case the sun shade changes, then we will see a difference of shade or white color even in our frame, because the camera adjusts it according to the shade of the sun. So which is not good, because whenever we are shooting a video, it should always be this the exact same white balance everywhere. uh, it's different when it comes to shooting movies, but especially for our cases, when if you are going live satsangas, or if you are shooting just the experiences of devotees, or if Swami is telling knowledge, there is no way that the shade should change in between the recording. So the shade should always be fixed. So choosing a white balance is not a great choice, because sometimes, even though you do not let the outside light enter into the scene, but let's say that you changed one of the parameters, like aperture or shutter speed, or ISO or something. If you change something, there is a chance that your white balance could get impacted if it is in auto mode. So white balance is not bad, but it's not the best choice that we have. Now we'll see all the other choices that we have. The second choice is preset white balance. So what is a preset? As the name suggests, preset. So we have all these different shades that are present in the camera by default. One is daylight, shade, cloudy, incandescent, fluorescent, etc. So each of them gives you a different shade of white. For example, whatever we are seeing here, this is somewhat fluorescent, and this could somewhat be a daylight. Shade will make the scene a bit darker. The shade is going to be a bit darker, etc. So these are different preset white balances that we have. If we like any of them, then we can choose it. But then again, this is not a good choice, because we are not going to like any of them. I tried every single one of them. None of them is good actually. And then coming to custom white balance. I'll tell this at the end, because this is what we will do. I'll cover the color temperature first. So the other way of setting white balance is using color temperature. So these are the color temperature ranges. Now 5600 Kelvin for daylight, 3200 Kelvin for tungsten. So we are always shooting our videos in the studio using 5600 Kelvin only. This is the maximum amount of cooler light that is supported by any studio light, and 3200 Kelvin is the most warm color, the orangish shade that we have, right? So if you remember in the previous satsangas, we have been using those halogen lights. So halogen lights, they can give only one color, which is tungsten, this orange color shade. So this will, first thing is it will heat up the room. Second thing is it will, it will cause irritation to the person whoever is sitting in front of this light for longer duration. Now, in order to solve this, so this is the case for halogen lights. This is the only option in halogen lights. But with the newer lights that we have, the LED lights, it gives us flexibility to switch from daylight to tungsten light. That is, you can make the shade of light, you can either make it cooler or you can make it warmer. So we are always shooting at 5600 Kelvin only. So ideally, what a white balance should be is it should exactly be equal to the temperature of the light that's being used. So since we are using 5600 Kelvin lights, the light temperature, we can set our auto balance. We can dial in temperature. So when you try to set white balance, you can choose custom white balance, and in that there is this option to select the temperature. So you can select custom slot, you can select the temperature, and you can give in this 5600 Kelvin as input, and your frame will be suiting the lighting that we have. And coming to the last option, again, the custom or manual white balance. So this color temperature is also custom. And the other custom white balance that we have here is that, let me show you something first before I tell you how we do it. Gray shade, white balance. Hmm. So there is something like this. Yeah, I actually purchased this card. So it came in sale for about 500. So what this card will do is that this is used to set the white balance. So an 18% gray shade, white balance card we call it. So you take this card and let's say some speaker is sitting. Let's say before we start the shooting, before Swami comes, one of us will go and sit in the chair and they will hold this exposure card and they will show it to the camera. And what we are going to do is that we'll go to white balance settings and we will select this particular shade. We'll click an image of the shade and we'll tell them that use the light whichever is being reflected by this gray card as white color. Okay. Did that make sense? If not, I can show you a short video. Hmm. So let's take a look at this video. So whoever is, whomever we are trying to shoot, they're going to hold this card in their hand. So it comes in two shades. One is gray, the other is white. The other image that I showed you has, which is just gray. The other side of it is going to be white. So they will hold something of this sort in their hand and just see this video, you'll understand. So what he did here is that he just went and he chose to, in the settings, he went and he chose to select the white balance manually. He made the person who is standing in the frame to catch this specific card and he, chose the specific spot in the gray shade to set the white balance. So this is how we set the white balance in the frame. So now the question here is that okay, you told that we can do both of these, which is good. The thing is, we can try out three of them and we can choose which is better. So yesterday when I tried, I felt that the manual color temperature feeding. So we need not even set this 5600 Kelvin. The camera that we have, right, FX30, so it has capability to automatically detect the temperature of the scene and it will, show up the temperature. So I tested that out and it is working perfectly fine. So it is exactly detecting the temperature that I have set in the studio lights. So I tried this out. I felt that this scene is better than the 18% gray shade scene. But then I was operating at 85% temperature in studio lights. So maybe if I put at 100, maybe this would also have been a good choice. But I tried this. This is good. So you can choose anything. So how do we know which is good? It's very simple. You just dial in whichever you want, the white balance, and you see which shade is looking good to your eyes, and you can go ahead with that. But if you want clear instruction on what should be done, you can go ahead and choose the color temperature. And this is also automatically detected by the camera. So if you go to one of the custom slots and you select it, then it will automatically detect the temperature and you can just select OK and it's done. Now, is it clear till now, whatever I have said, or do you have any doubts? Hello?
Good, Ramakant.
Okay. So this white balance is extremely important. Now let's take a look at this image that we have. On the left hand side, we are seeing an $8,000 camera, but it has a bad white balance. On the right side, we are seeing a $1,500 camera, but it has the perfect and correct white balance. So you can clearly tell the difference, right? Which is good and which is bad. So no matter how good camera you have or how good lens you have, it's very important to shoot the proper white balance. You should select your white balance properly. If you don't do that, the shade is going to get messed up. Now, $8,000 is quite big, right? It's about 7 lakh rupees. So no matter how costly your camera is, if you don't get your white balance right, then your entire video is going to be very bad. Now, sometimes you might have to adjust the white balance as per your needs. Now you should now take a look at this example. So here, uh, so here both of them, you cannot tell that okay, this is the perfect shade and this is not a good shade, right? Now let's say that you're shooting in snowy environments. The environment is kind of snowish and all, so this kind of white light is good, is what you may think. Or sometimes if you are shooting in very dark environments, and then you may think that this kind of light is good. So in few scenarios, you can adjust white balance as per the requirement of the shooting. But in general, the bottom line rule is that you should set it either to the color temperature, or you can use an 18% gray shade and fix the white balance temperature. So yeah, so as we discussed, the auto mode, it will try to fluctuate in between the scene, which is not good for our footage. So we'll have to dial in the white balance manually. So that's it about white balance. Any more doubts here? If not, I'll move on to the next topic. Any doubts? Doubts?
I think we can go ahead.
Okay, great. So next is exposure compensation. So exposure compensation, it's a very important concept again. So now, what is exposure compensation? So it's a very quick way to tell the camera to increase the brightness or decrease the brightness of your frame. So we saw, in the exposure triangle, that we have these three parameters, and we should tune them, properly so that it won't, disturb the side effects of it, etc., etc. But now you don't have any time with you, and you want things to be done as fast as you can, and you don't want to juggle any of those parameters, but you want to just increase the brightness of your camera urgently. What do you do is that there is this concept of exposure compensation, which lets you make the brightness of the scene a bit better. So I'll tell you what this does. So there is this plus. I'll show you the image so that you'll understand it even better. So actually, I'll show you the button that's present on camera, and then I'll show you the example. So exposure compensation is going to look somewhat like this in FX30. It's not exactly the way it's supposed to be. I don't think this is FX30, but it's very similar. So you have this bar, exposure compensation bar. It is always set at 0. Now let's say that you just want to increase the brightness of the scene. You just increase this. You click this press button. So our camera is touch screen, so you can directly hit on the screen instead of using the buttons. So if you hit the plus, it will increase the brightness by one stop. Okay, and if you hit plus again, it will increase by another stop. Now let's say that you think that the the video, that the frame is very bright, the scene is very bright. You just hit the minus, and it will go back -1, -2, -3. So it will instantly reduce the brightness of the scene, and it can instantly increase the brightness of the scene as well. So this is exposure compensation. Now I'll show you an example. So this is an example. So the middle image that you're seeing is exposure compensation 0. So at 0 compensation, this is how your image is going to look. But if you choose a plus 0.7, even at exposure 0, it somewhat feels dark, right? So here in this example, we increase the compensation to plus 0.7. So you can see that the scene has become a bit brighter. Now, let's say that you think that you want to make it even more darker, you just dial in a minus. So minus 0.7, and it will make the scene even more darker. So this is how we can use the exposure compensation. Now, if this exposure compensation, this looks like the easiest way out of this exposure triangle, right? instead of dealing with all those difficult parameters, I'll just change the exposure compensation, right? So this is how it's going to work actually. Now, exposure compensation, it doesn't tell you how much physical light is entering into camera, but exposure compensation will tell the camera to wantedly or deliberately get the lighting wrong, which means, let's say that you're shooting in auto mode, okay, and you started to hit record. Now, when you choose these auto settings, what's going to happen is that it will decide all the parameters for you, and it will show you whatever it thinks is the right exposure, whatever the camera thinks is the right exposure. Now, you think that whatever the camera is thinking is right exposure is not correct, or it is correct, but you still want to make it a bit dark. So in that case, you tell the camera that, hey, this is not what uh, an ideal lighting should be. Plus 0.7 is what an ideal lighting should be. So you're deliberately telling the camera to tweak the total exposure. Now, as I told, the fundamentals of videography does not change. So you have to tune into either ISO or aperture or shutter speed to change your brightness, right? Now, which among these parameters is going to change, right? Now, I'll tell you that in a minute. But now I'll tell you how this auto exposure system works. So this is exact line that suits how this exposure compensation is going to tell the auto exposure system. Your calculation is technically accurate, but I want the final image to be brighter or darker than that. So that's exactly what this dial in does. Dial in into plus or minus does. Now, now, how does this work? How does this actually work, right? So there are two steps in it. The first thing, the camera measures. So camera's light meter. So I'll tell you what light meter is. Metering system is something that's present in the camera, which is used to detect the light and analyze its relevance. Okay, so the camera's light meter analyzes the scene and can calculate what it believes as the correct mid gray exposure. So mid gray exposure is the 18% gray shade that I told. So the camera automatically does that for you, and it tells that, okay, this is the ideal shading that you will need for this scene. And if you think that this is not correct, you can dial the exposure compensation and you will tell that whatever you think is correct, but still I want you to add this +1 or plus 0.7 or something, so that it looks correct for me to match my creative intent. So this is a two-step process. The camera detects it and gives you a shade, and then you apply the offset. Now the question is, so this is with respect to the auto mode. The camera measuring is auto exposure. Now there are a few other modes for it, like shutter priority mode, aperture priority mode, program mode, etc. And how each of these modes work, we'll take it up in a later session, not now. But I can give you a very quick intro to this. In aperture priority mode, what's going to happen is that shutter is controlled by the camera automatically. Aperture and ISO are in our control in aperture priority. In shutter priority, aperture is in the control of camera. Shutter and ISO are in control of the user. In program mode, both the shutter and aperture are in control of camera. Only ISO is in our control. Okay. Now, these are called as semi-auto modes because it's not completely in your control, nor is it completely under the control of camera. So in auto mode, camera controls everything. In each of these modes, aperture priority, shutter priority, program priority, camera takes few controls and you have few controls in your hand. And then there is manual mode wherein every single operation is under your control. Now, when we increase the exposure compensation, which among these is going to change depends on the kind of mode that we are using to record the video. In aperture priority mode, since shutter speed is controlled by the camera, if you increase or decrease the shutter speed, if you increase or decrease the exposure compensation, shutter speed gets adjusted accordingly to meet your ideal lighting requirement. In shutter priority mode, since aperture is controlled by the camera, when you tweak the exposure compensation, it in turn is going to change the aperture to get your ideal exposure settings. In program mode, it changes the combination of both shutter speed and aperture together, and it will try to bring in the ideal exposure settings that you have asked it to. Okay, so that's all about the exposure compensation setting. So are there any doubts regarding this? Hello.
No, as of now.
Nothing from
Oh,
my side.
okay, great. So yeah, we are done with two topics. Now we'll get to something important: exposure bar or multimeter. This is not something. It's not something that will change the exposure, but it is just an indicator to us to understand what is the level of exposure that's being used in the current scene. Okay. Now I'll tell you what this is. So exposure bar or multi-bar or meter scale is a scale that's on the screen, which will tell you if the scene is overexposed or if it is underexposed. It look like this in our FX30 camera. You have the shutter here and you have the iris. Iris is nothing but the aperture, and here you're seeing mm, right? Mm is multimeter. So mm is saying minus 1.7. So okay, we have IS also here. So this is a great example to show you the exposure triangle also. Shutter is 1/50, which means that usually the FPS is 24. The iris or the aperture is f3.2. The ISO is 80. 80 is lesser than 100. It's lower than the native ISO also, which means that the quality of the video or photo is going to be very high. So f3.2 is very decent. Actually, it's better than f4. So it gives you a very good depth of field, and shutter 1/50 is going to give you the most natural motion blur. Now we are talking about the multimeter. Multimeter is saying minus 1.7. It means that your scene is underexposed. So you should change something. You can decrease, you can increase your aperture, or you can increase your ISO, or you can decrease the shutter, and you can make the scene more bright. So that is the indication for us. So sometimes when you're looking at the screen of the camera, you may not be able to tell if this is the correct exposure or not. So for that reason, you can refer to this bar, multimeter bar, and this multimeter bar will tell you it should always be zero. Zero means that it's not overexposed and also it's not underexposed. So if this is showing negative values, you should increase any of these values to make the scene brighter. If it is showing plus something, it means that your scene is overexposed, so you should bring it down. And ideally, we the neutral exposure setting is making sure your multimeter is set at zero, but it's always better to keep your scene slightly overexposed, maybe somewhat close to zero point 0.3. Instead of tuning your multimeter to 0.0, you can put it at zero point 0.3 so that the frame looks it gives you the enhanced look. If not, it's going to look neutral, which is not bad, which is good actually. But if you tune in even a bit more, like if you put the exposure at zero point 0.3, then it's going to look even more. It gives you that enhanced look, which will make our scene look brighter and good. So uh, it's Trilokia in the call.
Yes, Ramakant.
So last time when you were trying to record, the scene was too bright and we were not able to see anything in the screen, right? So at that time, in such scenarios, what we can do moving forward is that you can see this multimeter. So this I'm sure it would have shown you plus 2.0. So there is this limit on multimeter. It will either show you minus 2 or plus 2. No matter how much you increase the exposure, it's capped at these both values. So if your scene is really overexposed, it will keep blinking. It keeps blinking plus 2.0, plus 2.0. So that's an indication that, okay, our scene is overexposed and we need to bring it back. We need to bring it down. So that's one indicator which we can use. So now I'll just go through these points. So this exposure bar or multimeter is is an indicator that's present in our camera to tell if the scene is underexposed or overexposed or if it's correct. For example, -2, which is the maximum negative value. If that's present, the scene is too dark. If it's +2, it's too bright. If it's 0, it's balanced. Now, yeah, that's it. So you will see it when you are
That
in
is
manual
decided
or
by camera only, no? That is decided by camera depending on the white balance.
not white balance. It does so white balance is not related to this metering system. So white balance is nothing but just a shade. So the lighting itself will not change even 1% when we are, no matter how much we tuning the white balance, no much how perfect the white balance is, the brightness it's not going to change. It'll all be the same. But white balance is just used to give you the exact white shade that looks natural. But this multimeter is what should be used when you set everything manually or even in semi-manual modes. So for example, here this guy has set up 150 f3 and ISO 80. So how do I know if this is correct or not? Visually we can sometimes be biased towards let's make it more bright so that our speaker will look brighter, and in the end will end up ruining the entire scene. So instead of doing that, we should always look at this multimeter. It will take, so this multimeter, what it does is that it understands the exposure triangle properly. Okay, so there is this, it has the ability to understand the exposure triangle, and it, with respect to the values whichever are set, and with respect to the lights that's entering into the lens, and with respect to the image that it's processing, it will get an idea of if this is a good exposure or if it's a bad exposure. So its ability to decide if it's a good exposure or a bad exposure based on the values of exposure triangle is called as this multimeter bar indicator.
So
So
if it is showing minus 1.7, suppose I change the multimeter number to 0,
no,
then
no, no. We cannot change multimeter number.
that's what I
We
was asking. Yes, yes. So if you change the other parameters, like shutter speed, like ISO and other thing, then automatically this multimeter number will change.
multimeter number will. So
Oh,
yeah, that is correct. So it's just an indicator. Based on the settings you have put, it will tell you if what kind of exposure you are trying to set. Whatever you have set, it will show you that. Did you set up under exposure environment, or did you set up over exposure environment, or is your exposure correct? So it just reflects whatever your settings are, so that you can take correct decision like that. So
got
we cannot change this, this multimeter value manually. So if you change others, then you should change others in order to make this 0 or 0.3 like that.
got it, got it. And
Okay.
out of the three things that you told
Uh,
yesterday, we
uh,
are mostly going to change that ISO part.
yes, correct. That is true. We should change the ISO part only. We should never touch the aperture because our lens already has a restriction of only going till f4. So compared to an f2, we are always almost we are only getting 25% of the light into the lens. So the aperture is not great for our lens. For that reason, we must put the aperture at 4. There's no compromise on that. And since the motion blur has to be there, we should put the shutter speed also at 1 by 50 because FPS is capped at 24. So there's only one choice, which is going ahead and changing the ISO.
Got it.
So that is the last resolve. You do that. We do that also after putting the studio lights at maximum possible temperature, and then after selecting the proper white shade, and still if things doesn't work, then we should change the ISO. But what I was thinking is that in our studio, the softbox lights that we have, the LED lights that we have mounted, right? So they have three filters. They have the first neutralizer, they have the sorry, we have the first diffuser, you have second diffuser, and then you have grid, which is third diffuser. So if you really feel that the lighting is not good enough, you can remove the grid, or you can remove one of the diffusers to make the scene a bit brighter. But there's only one downside to it. It may you know give you too much of light, and Swami may feel discomfort, because that's the concern that you told the other day. But we'll have to try that out once, before we decide, because what's going to happen is that if you remove a diffuser, the spread of light is also going to increase, so which will fill the light, fill the scene with even more lighter, and it will diffuse the shadows. And maybe the heat also may decrease, because since we have an AC, there's almost no heat. But the only concern is if it will throw more light, right? So that's the only concern. I'll try that out as well next time I go to studio. And one more thing I would just want to tell is that I am noting down all the finalized settings that we are supposed to use practically, when we try out these, right? So these are the settings that I'm just noting down all the settings which I think are correct to be used. And once we are done with all the other things, right? For example, understanding the camera, understanding picture profiles, understanding different video modes, log shootings, etc., etc. By that time you would have understood everything, and then I'll tell you what works to us practically. And if any one of us is going to studio, if they have some free time, maybe they can also try things around, and you can also give suggestions on if we might have to change any of these settings, etc. So
This
so
Monday, if you are free,
yeah,
Monday
Monday I'm
or
going.
Tuesday, these days, I would request Abhiram and also there. And if possible, I will also come. That you
uh
can show us the camera, practically settings and
okay, sure.
everything. So we get to touch and
Yeah, definitely. Tuesday it's not possible because I'll go to office on that day. But we can definitely meet on Monday. I don't have office, so I can come. Even if you are coming or not, anyway, I have to go because yesterday we discussed to check the exposure settings, right? So I'll try to remove the picture profile, and I'll try. So that will likely resolve the issue. So I'll definitely come on Monday to studio. If any one of you are free, maybe you can also come.
Abhiraman, are you willing to come on mute?
Okay,
Ramakant,
maybe you can.
will you be able to come on? So I
Uh,
will come, Ramakant. You, me, and Swati. Swati is free. Will you come, Swa?
It's three Monday I can.
Okay,
Am I
Monday.
audible?
Monday,
Okay.
okay. We three can.
Okay.
I
Hmm.
can come by afternoon after lunch.
Okay, by afternoon he'll come. Okay. Okay, I'll come. I'll try to come before 11, maybe by 10:30 or something. I'll try to be there. Okay. So that's about the multimeter or exposure bar, and then we'll discuss about ND filters. So ND stands for neutral density. So I'll show you how it looks, and then I'll tell you what it does. ND filter 72. So this is how an ND filter looks.
Yeah, yesterday
In
you
this,
showed us this one.
this one.
This
So
is the solution for shooting under
bright,
the sun.
exactly correct. So if you remember, when we went to buy the lens, right? So that person gave what's his name, Omkar, right? So he gave us one UV density filter. He actually put it to our lens. He told that it's a free free gift from his end, right?
Ah,
So
yes, yes, yes.
the gold one, UV filter, Kodak gold. So where is that? So it looked something like this, right? He has put this lens. So he has put this ring, this glass onto our lens. So it gives protection from UV, right? So this is how we are supposed to put it. So we'll put it here. Now, why I'm talking about this is this ND filter is also something that has to be put to the lens in a similar way. Now we just attach the ND filter onto our lens. So you can consider this as sunglasses to the lens. something like this. So in a neutral density filter, it's the glass that I showed you, which you can mount to the front of your lens, and you can control the amount of light that is entering into your camera using the settings that are present in the ND filter. Now, why should we use an ND filter, right? As we discussed, we should use it mostly in outdoor environments. You can use it in indoor environments also. There's no problem with that. But usually it's used in outdoor environments. Now, there are many constraints when we are trying to shoot a video, right? Your shutter speed is always fixed. As per 180-degree rule, we should always put it at 150/24. And then you cannot change the aperture because we know that our lens has only f4, so you have to put it at f4. ISO should be kept at its native value. We are telling that we have so many options to change the exposure, but there are limitations on every single setting that is present. So what is a way out of it when we're talking about an overexposed scene, a bright outdoor scene, and you cannot change any of these? That's exactly when you need an ND filter. So this ND filter cuts out the light that's entering into our lens. Now, an ND filter cannot be used to increase the lighting that is, that's not present in a scene, but ND filter can be used to reduce the light that is entering into the lens from an overexposed, environment. Now, there are few things which we should understand when it comes to the ND filters. The very first thing being the thread size. I'll show an example for thread size also. Ours is an self SELP 18105 f4 OSSG Sony lens. So this is our lens. I wish there are more images of this. So here, if you see, it says the filter diameter is 72 mm, right? So 72 mm, also called as filter diameter or thread size of the lens, is very important in order to decide what should be the size of the ND filter. Okay. Now, let me tell you. Let's look at this. So this is an f4 power zoom. This is the lens. This is our lens actually. So here, if you see, you're seeing the symbol, right? There is a circle, and that circle is cut in the middle, so that it can form this symbol. And it says 72 here, which means that our thread size is 72, or the filter diameter is 72. Okay. And here you're seeing E. E is the type of mount that we have. 4 stands for the aperture that the lens can support, slash PZ. PZ stands for power zoom. We have 18-105. 18 is the minimum focal length and 105 is the maximum focal length. So this is a zoom lens which can facilitate proper zooming. G is the name of the series that Sony releases, and OSS is optical steady shoot, which means it gives good stabilization while you're trying to shoot. Now here what you're seeing is a range. So this is the zoom range. So the minimum is 0.45 meters till 0.95 meters. If you convert it into feet, it says 1.4 feet to 3.2 feet. So this is the zoom range that can be supported by this lens. Now, why I'm talking about this is because the thread size is 72, right? So your ND filter has to be of size 72 or higher. Now, will a higher ND filter will it directly fit onto the lens? No, it won't fit. There is the step up size, which we'll talk about. But I just wanted to show you this. So the thread size or filter density of our lens is 72. Now let's go back to our discussion. What is the thread size? So the thread size of ND filter should be equal to the filter density of your lens, which is 72 mm. Now, again, I'll just tell the definition. So what it is, it's a diameter of the front end of your lens measured in millimeters, where you screw on the filter. Now, how will you find it? You will see this phi symbol, and there you'll be able to figure out the thread size. So for us, it is 72, our lens. And okay, now we understood this. So what we should do is that you should buy an ND filter which has thread size of 72. ND filter 72 mm. So you can buy you can buy this one actually because it has 72 mm, which means this filter is going to fit to our camera. Now, so that's about the thread size. Now next thing is step up and step down rings. So I'll tell you what that is. For example, your filter, your lens has, I'll edit this value so that it will suit us. And for example, you have an ND filter which has a size of 77. Okay, 77 mm is the size of your ND filter, but your lens has size of 72 mm. So what you can do to fit this 77 mm filter onto your 72 mm thread is you can buy a step up ring. And what the step up ring will do is that it will have 72 mm ring attached to your lens, and it will give you an opening of 77. Okay, now I'll show you, what it is. Step up ring set. Exactly. So this is a step up ring set. So if you look at this, um, we have both step up and step down here. This image would be better actually. So if you look at this, right, these are the step up or step down. 48, 82, this is step down, and this is step up. So here, if you see, you have 37 to 49. I'm coming from bottom to the top. You have 37 to 49. You have 49 to 52, 52 to 55, 58 to 62, 62 to 67. So like that, right? So how is this going to help us? Let's say that you have your lens, which is our lens is 72 mm, right? So which is the top second ring. And let's say that the filter that you have is 82 mm. Now, of course, you cannot fit your 82 mm filter onto a 72 mm filter density lens. So what you're going to do is that you're going to take the top two rings, okay, and you're going to fit. So whatever number comes first. So here in the second ring, 72 mm is coming first, right? So that 72 mm is the size of on the back side. That is 72 mm goes into the camera, and 77 is kept open. Now, if you talk about the first string, 77 mm goes into the camera, and 82 mm is left on the outside. So if you want to fit an 82 mm ND filter onto a 72 mm lens, you need to take both of the first two rings, and you need to join them to the camera so that you will get an opening from 72 to 82 directly. So if you want just a 77 mm lens, 72 mm filter to attach to 72 mm lens, you can simply choose a second filter and you can mount it to the lens so that a 72 mm lens can support the 77 mm filter. So why? So there are two things again. One is step up, one is step down. So whatever I am showing you now is step up because you're going from here. The lens has a lower number and your filter has higher number. So you are stepping up, and then you have a step down, which means that you look at the very bottom filter, 82 mm to 77 mm, which means that your lens is 82 mm, but your filter is 77 mm. So you are connecting this, and you are potentially bringing down the lens diameter. You're trying to fit in low sized filter onto your high sized lens. So it's a step down. So this is the concept of step up and step down filters. Now the question is, okay, this is good, but which is good for us? Should we take because the lens size is fixed, right? It is 72 mm. We know that, at least in our case. So should we buy an 82 mm lens, an 82 mm filter, and we should, buy a step up ring and mount it onto the lens, or should we buy exactly 72 mm filter, or should we buy a lower sized filter and we can take a step down ring and you can mount it to the camera? So we have these three options. So the first option to rule out is the very last one. You should not choose a lower filter density lens, lower filter density filter, and mount it to a camera using a step down, because a lower ND filter has what do you call that? It's very dark actually. It's okay to use that for its specific lens thread, but in case you're trying to do a step down, it leads to something called as vignetting. It makes the scene, it gives the scene a black color shade. So that's ruled out. There are only two options now. You have a 72 lens and you can buy a 72 filter. Now this is good choice. We can go ahead and do that, but there is only one problem. The only problem with this is that if in future if you buy a different lens, okay, with let's say we are buying a prime lens. Now we will never buy any lens by keeping the thread size in mind, because there's no, I mean, it should not even be considered, because our focus should be on the aperture and the zoom range, right? So in case you want to use the 72 ND filter on a different lens, you can never use it because it won't support. So a good idea is you should buy an 82 ND filter, and you should buy this entire set of step up filters. It comes for very less price. All these rings together will cost us around 400. I'm not talking about step down, I'm talking only about step up. So we checked in Koti. He is giving all the step up rings for around 400, and the ND filter is costing somewhere around 2000, 2300, 2400, etc. So we can buy an 82 ND filter, and you can buy the step up ring, and you can use it. In case if you buy some other lens in the future, then you can adjust the step up rings, and we can mount the ND filter on top of it. So I'll just cover down whatever I told here that I wrote. So a step up ring, it adapts a small lens thread to a larger filter size. Hence it is step up. So you have 72 lens thread, you have 77 filter. So this is a step up. Now this is always standard and it is recommended type. It protects the lens. Now you have a step down ring. Step down ring is your lens is 77 and your filter is 67 This is a bad idea because it can cause severe vignetting. That is, it gives you dark corners. So ideally, what should we do is you should get maximum possible thread size of ND filter, and you should use a step up to mount it onto whichever type of lens that you want. So that is about step up and step down. Any doubts regarding this?
No, Ramakant.
Okay, great. Now we'll talk about ND stops, neutral density stops, and we'll also discuss about ND range. So this concludes this session on ND filters. So what's an ND stop? Basically, there is no option of stop actually. If you see, even yesterday Abhiraman asked, so how do we measure the stops? So the stops are never present anywhere, no matter which component it is. It is just for our understanding. So in ND filters, a stop can be considered as doubling or halving the light. So is a case with aperture. So from f5.6 to f4, the light gets halved. From f4 to f2.8, light gets halved, and from f1.8 to f1, light gets halved. So here also in ND filters, a stop can be considered as doubling the light or halving the light, depending on what the values are. So each ND stop halves the amount of light entering the lens. So if you use one stop ND, it halves the light. And if you choose two stop ND, it halves the light of the previous stop. So 1/2 divided by 2, so 1.8. Now a three stop ND filter, it reduces the light of previous stop by half. So 1/4 divided by 2, which is 1.8. Okay. Now there is another rule also, the 2 power n rule. So 2 power 1 is 1, so it halves the light. 2 square is 4, so it quarters the light. So 2 cube is 8, so it reduces the light by 1/4. Assuming that, I mean, this 1.4 is relative to 0 stop. That is, you haven't used an ND yet. From a natural light perspective, it's going to reduce the light by 1/8 if you use 3 stop ND. Now, this is about ND stops. We'll understand more about it in the table that I wrote. And then we have something called as ND range. So this ND range, it refers to the light blocking strength of filter described by its ND factor, filter name, stops, etc. Now I'll show it to you so that you'll understand it better. So these are names of ND filters. Okay, let me zoom out a bit. So let's take example of ND8. So ND8 is name of a filter. Now this 8 is called as ND factor. In ND16, 16 is a factor. In ND1000, 1000 is a factor. Now, there are two types of ND filters. One is fixed ND filter. The other is variable ND filter. So fixed ND filter has a fixed ND factor, neutral density factor, and a variable ND filter has a variable neutral density factor. So we should. So I'll tell you what we should choose at the end. But a variable ND filter would have something like this. It would be an ND2 to ND400. So the ND factor would be 2 to 400. We can choose whichever we want to select. Now coming to the stops of light reduction. So here we discussed, right? One stop halves the light, two stops, 1/4 light, and three stops makes it 1/8. So this ND factor is not the stop number; they are different. So coming to this to the stops, if you choose this ND factor as 8, it means that it gives you three stops, which means you can half the light, you can 1/4 the light, you can 1/8 the light which is present in the environment. So if you choose an ND factor of 16, it gives 4 stops. ND factor of 64 gives you 6. 1000 gives you 10. Now ND 2 to 400 gives you 1 to 9 stops. Now we want to understand how this. We want to understand the relationship between the ND factor and the stops that are present. So this is the formula that's present. So number of stops is equal to log of ND filter. So log 8 is 3, right? Because 2 cube, so it's 3. So log 16 is 4, log 1000 is 10, log 2 is 1 because base is 2, and log 400 is 8 point something, which can be rounded off to 9. So in that way, for these ND factors, we would be getting these many stops of light reduction. And what happens after, okay, I'll tell that later. So now we'll discuss, which would be a nice scenario to use each of these ND filters. So an ND8, it can be used for a light overcast. That is, if you want a shallow depth of field, outdoors. So of course, an ND filter is always used in outdoors. So if you look at the use cases, every use case says that it has to be used in outdoors only. But the bottom line is we should always choose a variable ND filter because it gives you the flexibility. Now, you should not choose a single ND filter. Of course, you can tell that even ND1000 has 10 stops and I can use it. But when you use a variable ND filter, it's an all-purpose thing. So you need not use it for any one single use case. Let's say you are shooting in your home only, but the exposure is a bit bright, or you went to sun, and let's say Swami is walking, or you're shooting in a very bright environment. For everything, the go-to solution is using this. So ND2 to ND400 is a very good solution. So we can buy this one, and I'll show this to you. I was planning to buy this one actually. ND2 to 400 filter, 71. This one. So this gives us 9 stops, which means you can reduce the light by half 9 times. And yeah, it's available. It has 2 to 400. And now the question is, there is one concept which is left over that I want to discuss. Will it cause? First, I should tell you cross effect. See. So what happens if you tune in the ND filter beyond its natural limit, right? So when you do that, you'll get this X mark. So more naturally, it looks like this. So here you'll see an X mark. So here it's more visible. So you'll get something like this if you overuse your ND filter. So we should buy the lenses. We should buy the filter which does not cause this X mark in its valid ND filter range. For example, if you're trying to buy an ND2 to 400, between this range, that that filter should not give us this X mark. Okay, so that this is called as the X mark or X effect. It's called as X cross or X effect. So this is something that we should be careful about when buying an ND filter. So if you have, so yeah, so this is what I wanted to cover. I wanted to cover lens also, but I think it's been more than an hour. So if you have time, I'll cover lens. If not, we can call it a session.
I think we are good for now, Rama.
Okay, great.
Ramakant,
Okay.
I shared that Prasad sir's video.
Hey, someone is recording this, right?
Trilokya is recording.
Uh, Thank you, Frederick. Okay, great. So you should, okay, let me share my screen in that case because you shared the recording. Right? Okay, before we play this, right? So I want to tell that when I was trying to record this, the scene was slightly overexposed because I tried to primarily processor is wearing a white color, so this white was shooting up, but I needed to set this color to make his face look a bit what do you call that face look a bit brighter and the entire scene to be good. Now, as Trilokya told, we can compare these both. The difference is quite visible, right? So here, if you see, right, so look at this and then let me play this one. What is this? So the difference is visible, right? Here you can see that it's slightly overexposed. Exposed. I mean, I told that we can make it slightly overexposed, but this is a bit more than slightly overexposed. And here it feels that this is very natural actually. So this is natural, but as I told, what happens when you put the meter at zero, the exposure bar when it is at zero, this is how it's going to look. Because when I was shooting, it was at zero. So for that reason, we can tune into something of 0.3 so that it's slightly overexposed, which gives you the enhanced brightness. It makes the scene look good. Here, this is a case of overexposure, slight overexposure. I mean, slightly more when it's actually overexposed. So the exposure that we control also depends on the kind of dress that the speaker is wearing. So, for example, if he had worn this an orange shade, right, it would have reflected the light, and it would have looked even more calmer because now, if you focus just on the face of Prasad, right, it looks very nice, right? It's shining properly and beautifully. So when Swami sits, it look even more beautiful because Swami has those, titli, that kumkuma and all, right? It look even good on Swami, this kind of thing. But this won't be an issue for Swami because he wears an orange shirt. Now this white is completely reflecting the entire studio light that's falling on him. On top of that, had I used an orange color shade, tungsten shade, the warmer shade, it wouldn't have caused an issue. But since I am using a white light on a white shirt, it's reflecting too much and it's making us think that it's overexposed. Matter of fact, it is because this white shirt seems to be too bright. So we will have to control that as well. So we'll have to tune in as per the shade of dress that's worn by the speaker as well. But if you put the dress aside, I mean, just look at his face, right? So how clear it is. And the local recording, it's even more better actually. And at that time, we did not know about much of these settings. So now we can make the video even more better. Now, if you look at this, you will see that you can, at least I feel that the quality has improved a lot since last time, right, Chailokya? ఇక్కడ చూస్తే అంత క్వాలిటీ అనిపించట్లేదు బ్రైట్గా ఉంది బట్ దెర్ ఇస్ నో మచ్ క్వాలిటీ బట్ ఇక్కడ చూడు ఈ క్వాలిటీ ఇంప్రూవ్ అయింది వీడియో క్వాలిటీ బాగుంది and this is not even 4K. This is in 1080 only we are able to make this, but here it is 4K. In 4K, this is the quality
Still
that you are
lot
getting.
of white light is there. There's a lot of white
It's
overexposure, I guess.
this is overexposure. So yeah, I mean at that point, that's what when initial stages, right? Even I did not know much about any of these things. So this was the very first day when we bought the camera, and that Sony guy, came and he showed us some things and he went. And yeah, so there was other video actually of Uday. Swatka, do you have that Uday video?
No, I don't have.
Okay, that looked very perfect actually, that video. So I mean, if you are talking just about quality, right? So I believe that the quality has improved significantly. back then and now. The only thing is that if we increase the exposure here, it look better. And I did not shoot in 4K, so this is just 1080. So in 4K, it look even more better actually. Okay. Any doubts in this session, guys? Whoever is in the call?
No, Rama, we are good. Actually, we need to. I need to this again better
I
understanding. But things are
I
very
cannot
clear.
hear you. Is it the case for others also? I cannot hear Trailokia.
Can you
Slightly
hear me
breaking.
now?
Now better.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
The session is good, Ramakant. We need a revision to listen again, because
Yeah.
this is the
Sure.
first time we are hearing these calls.
That's true. Yeah, you can take your time. I'll share this recording also in YouTube, like the other day that you asked me, and you can watch whenever you're free. So tomorrow, when can we have the session?
Your availability is important. I'm free.